political left does have some points. I've said it for years, but I've said it only rarely, and the sad fact is the left overwhelm the several points they do have with ridiculous and always power-focused fabrications. Fabrications meant to make it so that these issues and questions and problems are expressed in such a way as to require a leftist solution. Every time I sit down to write a think piece about the points they do have, the left, they fabricate a new grievance group and do everything in their power to make it the only thing anyone talks about for the next 2 years. This is the case with the recent trans nonsense. Furthermore, there are so many, quote, issues, end quote, out there that are nothing but fabrications that consume billions upon billions of intellectual ergs and that waste billions upon billions of hours of intelligent people's time when those brilliant people could have been working on solving real problems. What are some of those fabrications? Well, in no particular order: white supremacy, white privilege, all cops are bastards, defund the police, all men are bastards, feminism itself, trans oppression, gay oppression, environmentalism, diversity, equity, and inclusion, white racism, police brutality toward black Americans, rich need to pay their fair share, critical race theory, all white people are racists, all the phobias, and on and on and on and on and on and so on. Many, but not all, of these things have a teeny tiny kernel of truth to them. Not the trans stuff, which is complete hogwash, but many do. Critical race theory, for instance, has a tiny kernel of an issue at its center. White hostility toward black Americans, which is now essentially non-existent in reality, and is indeed non-existent in the management and oversight of societal institutions, that's one of the things that have a tiny kernel of truth. And it's a kernel of truth now, but it was a big issue back when it was formulated. It absolutely was a big problem, this white hostility toward non-white Americans. There was a time when white people who had lots of power in society simply did not treat black Americans well, and sometimes non-white Americans as well. So for instance, Asians and Indians or Caribbean, people of Caribbean ancestry, people like that. The point was that white people were not treating non-white people well. The big problem with the left, though, is not that they never identify any real issues, but that when they do stumble upon a real issue, their response to it is always not only wrong, but exquisitely crafted to make the problem worse. Part of the reason for that is after they identify the issue, they then always set out to craft the issue or to define the issue or to frame the issue in such a way as to establish an evil perpetrator group and an aggrieved victim group every time, when there may be neither present, or they may not be present to the extent to which the left says they are. Well, here's one issue that they've identified that, of course, they've completely befogged with lies and fabrications. And to this issue, of course, again, they've proposed ridiculous and terribly harmful policy recommendations. The issue? Inequality. Inequality of income and of possession. I agree, for instance, that there is no good reason outside of some kind of bizarre, even organic imbalance for someone like Elon Musk or Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos or the Google gazillionaires or Mark Zuckerberg to be worth north of $100 billion. It helps sometimes to envision what, say, $100 billion represents. So, for example, it means that Elon and all his kids and exes and all their descendants could live in unimaginable opulence for the next 1,000 years, taking as given, of course, that things aren't dramatically different 1,000 years from now. Is that unreasonable to say? I don't think so. $100 billion means that each of these men is, quote, worth, end quote, more than some small countries on the planet. What would the imbalance be that causes these inequalities? Well, simple. Government. If the market were truly free of government-caused imbalance, then there would be operating systems far better than Windows, and they would all interoperate. There would be far more ubiquitous platforms for operating systems than just Pentiums and Apples. And because of the vastly superior operating systems, all these platforms would interoperate seamlessly. There would be all manner of SpaceXs and Teslas and such. Much more of the basics of life would happen, you ready for this? Underground. And it'd be pleasant and attractive. As a result, much of the land taken up by roads and parking lots and such would return to nature. Oh, and EMP, electromagnetic pulses, wouldn't be a threat. There are all manner of database structures and scenarios already, and this is significant because database work is all that computers actually really do. It's true, but that's a topic for another day. But they would all interoperate seamlessly. Cars would fly, and we'd all have a flying car. The 28% of American land that the government controls now would be privatized, and the price of land would plummet. On that topic, land is power, and a free market requires that power be in the hands of the people, not the government. It's telling that the number one landowner in America is the central government in Washington, D.C., while the number one individual landowner is Bill Gates. And the number one corporate landowner is, I believe, BlackRock. None of these entities are the people. Therefore, the people have ever diminishing power. Land is power. So if we had a truly free market without government imbalance, costs for housing, medical care, and education would plummet and be far more in line with their actual values. And people like Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, the Google gazillionaires would all still be fabulously wealthy, but not nearly as fabulously wealthy as they are now. Furthermore, these gazillionaires would still be perfectly free to continue to increase their personal wealth without any hindrance whatsoever, but also they'd have to do it without the heavy assist that they've always received from the government, causing the imbalances that in the first place caused them to be over-the-top gazillionaires. Still, furthermore, there would be hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, potentially millions, probably millions, more people who would be fabulously wealthy too. Because of the tens of millions of high-caliber employment opportunities, much of that now organically redistributed wealth, and most importantly, organically redistributed power, would cascade downward to the middle and lower classes. Total American wealth would rise dramatically, all while inequality of income and possessions would plummet, and not through government action, but by preventing government action and by dismantling government power. So the left has a point about inequality and, as usual, lies about its details and prescribes the very response, more government, that would make the problem far worse. They would take the money from the wealthy and give it to the government, thereby making more government, which brought about the problem in the first place and which would simply exacerbate the problem even more. The right's response, at least if the right is sincere in its adherence to its core tenets, is to propose systems that will incentivize making the have-nots more wealthy. The right will always add wealth and prosperity into the system, while the left always aims to remove wealth and prosperity from the system. Calling things what they are is vital. It's not. This is, by the way, a second section to this whole podcast episode. Calling things what they are is vital. It's not, for example, quote, gender-affirming care, end quote. It is, when you do it to kids, carving up children. It is Mengele-like experimentation on children. It is child abuse. It is child mutilation. Call it these things. And it continues. It is racist abuse of black Americans in cities. Yep, racist abuse of black Americans in cities. You could call what the Democrats have done in American cities, quote, crimes against humanity, end quote, but only because it is. Freaking call it that. Call it atrocities, too. Democrat policies are crimes against humanity. Call them that. More to the point, they're racist crimes against humanity, as the cities in America have become killing fields for young black men especially. And, next section, teachers indoctrinating our children into wokeness about sex and gender, they're perverts. Call them that. Fearlessly. Never call them anything less pointed or hostile than that. They're pedophiles too, and that's a vile, ugly thing to be. Say that. They're actively harming your children and mine. They're perverts. Say it. To borrow something from someone else, say their names. Their name is perverts or pedophiles. But let's be honest, sometimes the left has a point. Yes, they then do their level best to prove that they can't address that point honestly or with integrity. Of course, that's all they know. Our responsibility on the right is to be far, far, far stronger and more forceful, far more tenacious, implacable even, at getting a freedom/free market message and response out there. And sometimes our tools must be the same as those on the left. Civil disobedience, for example, in response to the left's desire to carve up children, should always be on the table. Serious question. Would it really have been a bad thing for a large mob of really angry Britons late one night to charge into the Tavistock Clinic and with sledgehammers, axes, baseball or cricket bats and things, utterly lay waste to the place so that no one could ever mutilate another child there? Absolutely no need to harm any person, but raze the facility to the ground. Reduce the building and everything in it to rubble. Would that really really have been a bad thing? Now how about doing that here in America? Hey, put masks on, and Antifa sweatshirts, and t-shirts and things, and the cops will leave you alone long enough to destroy the ability of anyone to maim a child there. So let the left identify a problem, but never let them define it, because they won't do it honestly or correctly. We must define it. Never let them propose a response first. We must propose a response first. Never worry about the inevitable, knee-jerk, automatic cries of racism, etc. React to them by pre-acting to them. Examples, or an example. Quote, "The left will call this proposal racist or sexist, etc., because it's the only argument they have. We, on the other hand, know that no idea of ours is perfect when it's first hatched. We challenge our opponents to work with us, not against us as they usually do, to find those flaws and to help us to hone our nation's united response so as to fix the problem." End quote. Something like that. Pre-act to the accusations that you know will come as soon as you propose a solution. As I've mentioned many times before, the left operates and thinks on level 1, the most basic, superficial, emotion-fueled, simplistic, almost primitive level of thinking. We operate and think on at least level 2, but generally on level 4 and higher. We can use the fact that we start out at a more elevated intellectual and philosophical level to our advantage and beat down the left fairly easily. But we have to want to beat them down. And, frankly, there are few nobler pursuits than to beat down today's political left. But let's not lose sight of the fact that they occasionally do have a point. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe and smack the notifications bell so that you'll be notified whenever we put out new content. And thank you again.